Wo ist Mr. Song? Oh no. Wait, ich will das da. Da muss ich eine Taste für festlegen. Auf dem Keyboard. Das will ich machen, ne? Was muss ich sagen? So. Yes. Das da. Okay. Eigentlich Gucci. So, wollen wir machen das da. Oh, was? Ist ja fast leer, Junge. Okay. Wie geht das? Bestätigung? Nee, das ist das. Dual Binding, Dual Equation. Ja, genau, das ist Dual Equation. Meta Binding. Ich glaube, das ist das. Genau, ich kann dann sagen. Weiß ich nicht. Das da, das da, das da, das da. Das ist Helligkeit, das ist Makro. Ja, mache ich mal hier. So, erstmal noch eine Discord-Taste. Keybindings. Add Keybinding. Toggle Streamer Mode. Nee. Achso, nee, doch. Jetzt machen wir es so. Und dann sage ich Tastaturtasten. Funktion. 12. 13, 14. Das wäre dann 24, 23, 22, 21, 20. Ja, moin. Wir sind. So. Und das funktioniert jetzt, oder was? Ah ja, krass. Nee, warum ist denn das UNK? Was ist denn UNK? Also was geil ist, ist, dass die Tastatur dann leuchtet. Okay, ich lasse es mal drin. Ne? UNK. Ah ja, funktioniert. Geil. Wie sind? Konntest du ein bisschen was mit dem Kram anfangen, was ich dir geschickt hatte? Hoffentlich. I hope so. Sieht man alles, ja. So, da muss ich Steam wechseln. Braucht man echt ein Das sieht man nämlich meinen Steam-Namen. Das ist nämlich eigentlich gar nicht so geil, ne? Houdini. So. Let's go. Hier konnte es irgendwie leider nicht installieren. Wait, what? Und sonst Ostern frei? Geil. Prost. Also. Houdini. Ich mache Musik ein bisschen leiser. Wir sind stehen geblieben bei den Attributen. Im letzten Video ist er ein bisschen auf die Attributsverteilung innerhalb eines Space gegangen, womit ich dann wilde Sachen machen konnte. So, und heute gehen wir dann die restlichen Tutorials durch. Mal gucken, wie weit wir kommen. Vielleicht schaffe ich es dann auch mal, irgendwann demnächst mal, irgendwas zu bauen, wirklich. Weiß nicht, irgendwas Cooles.
To episode number 2 of getting started with attributes and VOPs inside of Houdini, and in this one we'll be talking about attribute blur, attribute transfer, attribute from volume, promote, visualize, all that kind of good stuff, and eventually we will end up creating this sort of a procedural motion graphic setup, which is relatively simple but looks pretty cool. Of course, you can improve anything and everything about it, and it's not just being procedural. Of course, we can move everything by hand and everything will work pretty good. So let's get started.
Okay, also ich habe die Überlegung, dass er einen Grid hat. Auf dem Grid gibt es ein Point-System, wo er die Zylinder hat, wo er dann ein bisschen Round-Effekt drüber kloppt und dann einen Markerpunkt hat, der dann die Höhe, je näher der an dem Punkt ist, desto höher macht er die Dinger dann. Und desto runder auch.
If you're interested in supporting the channel, please consider subscribing to the Patreon, because all of the scene files, all of the project files are there.
Houdini ist ein prozedurales, Node-based 3D-Tool. Alles Große, was du kennst, alles Explosionen, Wasser, Rauch, Partikeleffekte an sich, auch 3D-Modelle sind meistens Industriestandard in Houdini erstellt worden. Also zum Beispiel das hier ist dann auch in Houdini erstellt worden. Und das ist halt super klein, ne? Also du sagst, es ist ein Grid und es ist halt Node-based. Und dann kannst du es dann exportieren, hast du Schnittstelle zu Unreal und so weiter. Und ja. Such mal nach Houdini Reels oder Houdini ja, Reels. Ich weiß gar nicht, wie man es anders nennt. Und dann wirst du ein paar Videos sehen. Also das ist halt super, super krass.
If you want to follow along or just want to support the channel, that'll be the best way to do it. But of course it's not mandatory. Only do that if you wish. Anyway, without further ado, let's actually start creating our setups. And I will delete everything. First things first, don't forget to save, as in 02, transfer, blur, promote, and all that. And start with, as per usual, geometry. So we'll start with a grid. Shift W to enable the visualization of the wireframe. And let's give it a little bit more of resolution. So first things first, I want to talk to you about attribute transfer and attribute visualize. So previously we visualized the attributes using the way of doing that, as in we just put the attributes into color diffuse in the CD and it was kind of visible inside of our geometry. However, it overrided the colors, which is not the best way to do it. So how do we do that? Let's just do the attribute transfer. Here we go. And we transfer something from the sphere that I created to our grid. And as you can see, there's, well, pretty much nothing going on. Why is that? Because, well, let's actually create some color. As you can see, currently it does not really transfer anything from anywhere because we do not have any attributes except.
Das ist die Reaktion. So, oha. Ist super stark. Also, es gibt eine Educational Version, die ist kostenlos. Und ich finde es wesentlich angenehmer, damit irgendwas zu bauen, als mit Blender. Und, sind wir ehrlich, Maya, 3ds Max und so weiter ist viel zu teuer. Und die Educational ist so an sich kostenlos. Du kannst auch du kannst keine FBX-Exports machen und auch hast keinen Live-Link zu Unreal. Also ich kann hier was erstellen, die Parameter nach Unreal übergeben und kann in Unreal die Sachen anpassen, ne, was halt super strong ist. Aber die Educational Version zum Beispiel kannst du OBJ exportieren und die auch ganz normal in Unreal importieren.
And of course the sphere should be polygon, okay? Or polygon mesh or anything. It's just anything than primitive. So let's say we create color here as well. However, this one will be white and this one will be something like this, okay? And as you can see, we have already everything getting orange inside of our grid. However, if we decrease the distance thresholds and the kernel radius and all that kind of stuff,
Hä?
you will see that we indeed start transferring the attributes and everything seems to be working as.
So, und jetzt kommt das Geile. Es sieht mega kompliziert aus. Nee, eigentlich überhaupt nicht. Also, wenn du es gleich siehst, kann man das super einfach erklären. Und das ist halt richtig geil, ne? Also hier zum Beispiel, er hat halt ein Grid, das ist das Große, und dem gibt er eine Farbe und dann sagt, okay, ich möchte dem jetzt schwarz geben. So, und das ist einfach bloß, du hast immer die Reihenfolge nach unten. Und du kannst dann hier definieren, zum Beispiel hier sagt er, hier gibt es einen Attribute-Transfer, das erklärt er ja gerade, aber im Endeffekt nutzt das Ding eine Sphere, also hier ist eine Sphere, ne, das ist meine Sphere, und das kann ich dann ziemlich wahrscheinlich, kann ich die dann so bewegen und dadurch bewege ich dann den Rest. Und dann färbe ich die Sachen plötzlich ein. Und das kann ich animieren alles und so. Also es ist nicht so kompliziert, wie du glaubst. Gerade die Tutorial-Series, die er hat, erklärt das unglaublich gut.
As expected, right? So if we move around our sphere, you'll see that indeed the color attribute is being moved from sphere to our grid. All right.
Also wenn du noch kein 3D-Tool für dich gefunden hast, wo du sagst, okay, ich möchte dann doch ein bisschen was machen, ne? Weil ich selbst sag auch, okay, gibt vielleicht nur Kleinigkeiten, die ich selber bauen möchte, ne? Das heißt, sei es ein Rohr oder also ganz banale Dinge, ne? Wo du ganz genau sagst, okay, ich brauche jetzt genau irgendwie dann doch so ein kleines Rohr oder eine Tür, einen Türrahmen, so was unglaublich einfach eigentlich ist, wo die Texturen dir noch keine Gedanken machst. Das kannst du dann halt hier super einfach und eigentlich auch relativ bequem erstellen. Und prozedural, das heißt alles non-destructive, weil die Farbe von dem Ding hier unten ist jetzt natürlich rot. Aber ich kann die Color hier einfach rausnehmen und kann sagen, okay, ja, ich ändere das und möchte da was anderes haben. Und anstatt einer Sphäre möchte ich jetzt keine Sphäre haben, sondern ich möchte jetzt eine Box haben zum Beispiel. Und das ist das, ich tausche es einfach aus und es ist jetzt plötzlich eine Box anstatt eine Sphäre. Oder jetzt ist es in dem Fall beides. Und dann kann ich die Box benutzen. Und dann sage ich, nee, die Box ist mir aber nicht groß genug. Ich möchte eine andere Box haben. Dann kann ich halt sagen, okay, alles klar, ich mache die Box jetzt größer. Oder hier in dem Fall mache ich die halt breiter. Und so weiter und so weiter. Also das ist halt unglaublich mächtig an der Stelle, wie du da vorgehen kannst. Und das macht's halt aus.
This is fine. So what if we don't have the color attribute? What if we want to create some attribute that we want? So we do that by attribute create. And by the way, if you want to transfer one attribute from one geometry to another geometry, like what...
Ich kann die Seite dazu irgendwie nicht finden. Was meinst du? Von Houdini oder was? Sideeffects.com. Und dann kannst du, warte mal, ich schick's dir mal. Also es gibt ein paar Sachen, die fehlen, weil ich habe die Indie-Version über Steam mir geholt. Aber gerade für den Anfang kannst du halt mit der, genau, hier kannst du über Get und dann kriegst du die Dings-Version. Die Educational Version, glaube ich. Ist die noch? Educational Apprentice, genau, so heißt die. Ja, nicht Softonic, ja, bestimmt nicht. Piss dich mal. Ja, hier, genau. Hier, ich poste gerade herein. Genau. Damit kannst du halt rumspielen, ne? Und dann gibt's, die haben unglaublich großes Learning-Ding, aber die Tutorials von ihm sind halt echt gut. Da kannst du halt theoretisch irgendwo hier unten anfangen. Ich glaube, das da. Es gibt ein paar Sachen, wo er sich drauf bezieht, bezüglich, wie es dann weitergeht. Also, wie es dann, also er nutzt Sachen halt aus der Indie-Version, ne? Aber prinzipiell grundlegend kann man damit arbeiten. Alternative, auch sehr gute Tutorials sind dann, kann ich dir auch raussuchen. Where's my banana? Ich erkläre das auch ganz gut, glaube ich, sogar Deutscher. Ja. Das sind halt die Tutorials dann. Super gut. Gerade für den Anfang. Der macht ja noch eine Zahnbürste und so. Der Helge. Und ist schon ganz nice. So, okay, wo waren wir denn?
We'll be doing just now. You don't need to actually create the attribute on the geometry that you want to transfer to. So let me just showcase. So first things first, the name will be beveler because at first we will try to bevel things inside of our grid using the transfer. And the attribute transfer will be, will be beveler, as you can see. And indeed, we now have 2 points attributes. One is beveler, the other is P for position. All right, so now we need to actually see our attribute. And there is this attribute visualize. And we go to the visualizers and we say that the attribute that we want to actually visualize would be beveler, right? And right now, if I enable this, you'll see that something is probably happening, but not really. So basically, previously, I forgot to tell you that before we actually started to transfer the attribute, previously we had no beveler attribute before ever. And then when you just create attribute create, right? When we just attribute create, here it is. You will see that the default value for attributes is 0 and the actual value is again 0. So what we're gonna do is actually give it the value of 1, press enter, and we can see the light blue is going on. So the light blue is because, as you will see, that the color ramp goes from, it's kind of like infrared, right?
Sieht unterschiedlich bei ihm aus.
However, if we know that the maximum of our attribute is 1.
Irgendwas verpasst?
Thing is, right, stilize. The name will be beveler because, and the attribute transfer will be.
Okay, als hier rumspielt.
Will be beveler, as you can see. And indeed, we now have 2 points attributes. One is beveler, the other is P for position. All right, so now we need to actually see our attribute.
Wait. Ich glaube, ich bin. Naja, ich muss. Achso, das wollte ich noch anpassen. Moment, das kommt weg.
And there is this attribute visualize. and we go to the visualizers and we say that the attribute that we want to actually visualize would be beveler, right? And right now, if I enable this, you'll see that...
Hat auch Ramped Attribute. Warum sieht es bei ihm anders aus?
Something is probably happening, but not really. So basically, previously, I forgot to tell you that before we actually started to do attribute before ever, previously we had no beveler, right? When we just attribute create, here it is 0 and the actual value of 1, press enter, and we can see the light blue is going on. So the light blue is because, as you will see, that the color ramp goes from, it's kind of like infrared, right? However, if we know that the maximum of our attribute is 1, that's what we've written here. However, it actually visualizes from 0 to 10, so if we reduce that to 1 as well, you'll see that it is more accurately being visualized from 0 to 1. All right, so now that we know that we have our attribute and everything is being promoted and, you know, working well, we can finally do the polybevel.
Klassiker.
Place the distance like 0.1 or something, scale by attribute, and again delete this.
Ah, yeah, okay.
And say beveler, right? And now you see that indeed the bevel is being controlled by our attribute. You can enable or disable the visualization by pressing this icon, and you will now see or disable the visualization by pressing this icon, and you will now see just the polybevel result. So if we now move around our geometry, you will see that indeed bevel is being controlled. However, as you can see, it's not really smooth or anything. It's kind of like a bit janky, so that's not very good, right? So how do we make it so when we animate our things, the attribute is being transferred more smoothly than we currently have here? So the way to do that would be actually attribute blur, and by default it will start working on positions. So if you have some sort of jagged geometry, you can actually blur the position of attributes and the geometry will be smoother. However, in our case, of course, we want just to smooth the attribute that we have that's called beveler. Of course, the name does what it says, the blurring iterations and the step size of the blurring iterations. So kind of like this, you can increase or decrease the blurring. And of course, when you start transferring your things, it will move around, everything will be looking much better. And our polybevel, if I disable visualization and go back to transform, you will see that indeed it actually starts to be more and more smooth. So that's pretty cool. However, you will see that now our attributes are just point attributes. And what if we want to actually do the poly extrude like we did previously, right? The poly extrusion should be controlled by some sort of a primitive attribute, right? The bevel works on edges and points, so the point attribute beveler works well. However, the poly extrusion, if we make the distance something like this, and we do the individual elements, just for visualization's sake, we do something like this, you will see that if we start writing the local control distance scale and we start typing beveler, nothing will happen because the beveler, again, is a point attribute. And what we need is a primitive attribute. How do we convert one type of attribute into another? Is attribute promote. So we place attribute promote here, and we state that original name was beveler, original class was point, and the new class that we want is, of course, primitive. And as you can see immediately.
Okay, also ich bestimme dann und sage, okay, was du jetzt bist dann. Ja, okay.
When we've done just that, you will see that our poly extrude now respects.
Okay, also damit ändere ich es einfach um. Dann sage ich p-extrude und sage ihm individual elements und local control. Ich sage den distance und das ist dann Traveler. Ja, ja moin, ne?
Our attribute as well. So here we are. Let's transform our sphere a little bit. You will see that indeed the results are in.
Ja. Krass, ne? Ich würde mal sagen, das ist ziemlich strong.
Works. So next up, let me get back to our attribute visualize, and I will disable the blur, enable the actual visualization, and start tweaking the conditions. So if I do the distance threshold kind of like this, and I'll increase.
Moment, wollte,
so
warte mal.
If I do the distance threshold.
Attribute transfer, okay. Distance threshold.
Threshold, kind of like this, and I'll increase the scale of our sphere a little bit. You will see that it does not actually include everything that's inside of our sphere. So basically the
Aber ja, theoretisch sieht das dann ja jetzt so aus. Wenn du dann die Sphere drehst, kannst du schon verrückte Sachen mitmachen, ne? Okay.
The attribute is being transferred from the surface of the sphere, right? As you can see, from the surface of the sphere, but it doesn't take into account anything that's inside of it, right? Of course, if we increase the distance threshold, it will eventually be so large that it will encapsulate everything inside. However, it will grow outside as well. So that's, again, not very good. So how do we alleviate that? Is actually we do the attribute from volume.
Ich habe jetzt noch nicht das Problem verstanden.
However, as you might have already imagined, we have to have volume instead of, just geometry, of course. So we get grid here, and here we need to have some sort of a volume. So we do that by converting our geometry from polygons to VDB. So VDB from polygons, enter, here it is. So again, previously I have talked about this, but if you don't know or missed or don't remember or whatever really, we create VDB from our sphere. All right, so interestingly enough, we can actually, so we have the volume. However, we can create this point attribute on the volume. And when we want to move our volume around so that we can, do something like this, right? So we can just transform our geometry.
Okay, das ist, wie stottert er sich ein zurecht und wie habe ich erklärt er nichts.
Here, instead of actually transforming the sphere, then converting it to volume, we should transform the volume itself after it has been created, so it doesn't recalculate volume all the time. And actually do the transformation after we create the attribute as well. It's not mandatory, just, for organizational purposes. We create everything, then we move it around, right? Okay, so transform to attribute from volume, and here it is. Of course, it says
Also, sorry, das war ja gerade nichts, was er da irgendwie versucht hat zu erklären.
Attribute name that's being transferred is actually CD. This is why we have gray here, black here. But we know that we have the beveler, and indeed we can just say beveler. Attribute type float. However, the attribute size is, well, it's not a vector attribute, it's just the float attribute, right? As it says here, point float. So float, just 1. It doesn't need anything else. And we need to visualize. Here we are. You'll see that we have kind of the same result we had previously. However, we can just press fill interior and you'll see everything finally works as expected. Interior, and you'll see the result we had previously. However, we can just press fill interior and you'll see everything finally works as expected. And now, if we do even the attribute blur and visualize, kind of like this, you'll see that finally we have everything inside and it gradually goes.
Okay, also die Erklärung war irgendwie gar nichts.
So our poly bevel works much better and it fills inside our geometry regardless of the conditions that we had previously, like distance threshold and kernel radius.
Also ich verstehe den Hintergrund, was er macht, ne? Also, aber die Erklärung war jetzt doch etwas nicht vorhanden.
Like this. Or attribute, we need to tweak a lot of things. Of course, as you can see here, it's kind of a little bit weird. So we have a little bit of a poly beveling happening here, and we can remap our attribute like this from here.
Das klingt schon nach einer sehr spezifischen Fehlerproblemklärung.
Here to here. Something like input range 0.3 to actually 1. I think it will be pretty good. All right. And here we go. If I disable the visualization, we'll see that everything works as intended. And if we poly extrude.
Er erklärt halt, was das intended ist für ihn, aber es ist halt so, ja, okay.
It looks kind of weird because it got inverted and we can flip it back.
Warum wurde es inverted?
1, 2, 0, and here we go. Of course, you can tweak the ranges here as well. Or you can indeed remap it using the attribute VAP. We will talk about that a little bit later, how to use attribute VAP to, using the attribute ramp and all this kind of good stuff. And we will check out how to control our attributes a little bit better. However, for now, I think this will do just fine. Of course, you can tweak the bevel amount. You can, again, tweak the input ranges so it kind of looks a little bit better. I think we can make our sphere much smaller because this is apparently too much. And here we go. Finally, we can just do the subdivision. So we had some sort of a result we had previously. Do the null here, maybe increase subdivision to something like 2. Do the poly extrusion maybe through something like 4 divisions. And here we go. So we had some sort of a result we had previously. Do the null here, maybe increase subdivision to something like 2. Do the poly extrusion maybe through.
Okay, hier verhält sich etwas merkwürdig.
Something like 4 divisions. And here we go.
Okay, das ist nicht das, was wir erwartet haben. Da hat er wahrscheinlich wirklich irgendwo auf die Attribute Volume. Was war das? War das hier?
Everything works as intended. And if we poly extrude, it looks kind of weird because it got inverted. And we can flip it back if we do the input range from 1 to 0. And here we go. Of course, you can tweak the ranges here as well. Or you can indeed remap it using the attribute VAP. We will talk about that a little bit later, how to use attribute WAP to, using the attribute ramp and all this kind of good stuff. And we will check out how to control our attributes a little bit better. However, for now, I think this will do just fine. Of course, you can tweak the bevel amount. You can, again, tweak the input ranges so it kind of looks a little bit better. I think we can make our sphere much smaller because this is apparently too much. And here we go. Finally, we can just do the subdivision. So we had some sort of a result we had previously. Do the null here, maybe increase subdivision to something like 2. Do the poly extrusion, maybe.
Okay, irgendwo habe ich den Faden verloren.
Something like 4 divisions. And here we go.
Okay, aber die Zwischenteile hat er auch, die sehen bei mir nur ein bisschen anders aus.
Disable the poly bevel, so it's not looking as.
Aber ich glaube, das hat er am Anfang erwähnt.
Shift outside of this transform. Just move our vote.
Jo, danke fürs Reinschauen. Bis dann.
Right. Of course, as you can do,
okay, macht den Animation noch. Normals.
Transfer attribute from one geometry to another. From any other value that you want. You can blur the attribute using the, for example, if you want to use some sort of attribute in materials for your maps, enable, disable using this button levels. Because I'm trying to make.
Okay, also das Tutorial war echt gar nichts. Also das war irgendwie der ganz komisch einfach nur vor sich hin erzählt und da hätte er sich, glaube ich, dran getan, noch sich ein paar mehr Minuten zu nehmen und dann nochmal von vorne anzufangen.
Hello, welcome to
damit man ein bisschen das Gefühl dafür bekommt, so was hat er denn, also warum tut er das? Sondern er sagt dann so, ja, damit es halt so aussieht, aber das hört sich dann alles so an. Alles sehr, schade. Okay. The for each in this setup seems not necessary because you don't use any attributes from this. Copy and try to have a special prim. You can export to check copy none. It can be used in random colorizing and for randomize the noise in the web.
Episode number 3 of getting started with attributes and WAPs inside of Houdini. And in this one, we'll be actually talking how we can recreate the effect that has the mount node. And indeed, we will be diving inside of attribute WAP and create our displacement along normals, where we will be creating this little setup. As you can see, there is a number of copies of circles. And of course, we can animate them so they can create this simple motion graphics setup. Of course, we can control everything from scale to frequency to offset to everything else. And we will learn a couple of tips and tricks like connectivity and colorization based on attribute as well. This will be another lesson where you will be not just learning some practical but also fundamental theoretical things that will help you along your way of learning Houdini. So let's get going. But before we start, I just want to say that if you're interested in supporting the channel, please consider subscribing to Patreon because all the scenes files and the assets will be there for you to follow along. But of course, it's not mandatory. So if you're not feeling like it, no pressure. So let's get started. As per usual, I'll just delete my geometry and recreate it, right? So jump inside, create a circle. You'll see that, well, whoops, indeed we have the circle. And of course, I want it to be on the ZX plane. And now we will start actually trying to create some copies and start displacing our geometry along the normals. Let's just do the copy and transform. And of course, we can do like a number of copies, for example, 7, and translation along the y-axis 0.2, or anything else really, it doesn't really matter. So next up, let's actually drop the attribute WAP. Shift Enter. So we will be using the node displace along normal, and as the name suggests, we will do something with the positions. Well, basically, we'll
displace. Okay. Gut, er will Attribute Vobs erklären. Okay, gut. Weil ich habe gedacht, okay, du kannst auch einfach so Circles machen. Also ohne, einfach nur außenrum theoretisch und dann die verformen. Aber ja, gut.
Suggests we will do something with the positions. Well, basically, we will displace them along the normals. However, for that to work properly, we actually have to have proper normals, of course.
Yo, wait.
We will do something with the positions. Well, basically, we will displace them along the normals. However, for that to work properly, we actually have to have proper normals, of course. So let's just display normals, enable, and I'll just look at our circle, and you will see those faint green lines. I'm not sure if you see them on the YouTube or not, but hopefully you do. If you enable this button, you will see the normals. So these are not the normals that we actually want, because they will otherwise be displacing up and down. We need for them to go inside or outside based on the center of our circle. So we do that by polyframe. We did that previously, but if you skip that part, no big deal. You'll see that we will be covering all of the things that needed to do for that effect just now. So first things first, as you can see, it computes the normals, which are basically the same as we previously had. However, what we need to do is to write the tangents as normals. So we disable the normal name as n, disable that, and write the tangent name. We'll place uppercase n here, and you'll see immediately that, first of all, if I disable the visualization of the normals, you'll see that our circle looks kind of weird, but it is looking weird because we recomputed the normals to our liking, of course. And as you can see, they're pointing towards the center of our circle. Let's increase the divisions. For example, I don't know, 40. You'll see that indeed that's what we need. So next up, as you can see, we're copying our result. And before we do that, let's just try on one of our circles. And of course, I can do the polywire, do the wire radius 0.3, for example, a little bit more divisions, disable this, and for example, a little bit more divisions, disable this, and
disable this ist immer gut.
A little bit more divisions, disable this, and drop another normal so they kind of, look correct. And that's our result. So let's start moving our points around. I'll enable the visualization of points so they can see what's happening. And of course,
Tutorial zu machen ist unglaublich schwierig, wenn man gerade so Follow-along-Tutorials macht. So, ja, ich erkläre Sachen, aber viele Leute nutzen das halt, um parallel mitzuarbeiten. Und das ist dann schwierig, weil du dann viel auf dein Audio hören musst.
I'll enable the visualization of points so they can see. And that's our result. So let's start moving our points around. I'll enable the visualization of points so they can see what's happening. And of course, we will be moving our points based on noise, because that's the easiest and more or less straightforward way to do that. So for
okay, das heißt,
what's happening, our points around, our result. So let's start.
noch wesentlich mehr Points durchs Polywire, oder? Nein, eigentlich nicht. Naja, okay.
Moving our points around. I'll enable the visualization of points so they can see what's happening. And of course, we will be moving our points based on noise, because that's the easiest and more or less straightforward way to do that. So for noise, what's happening? And of course, we will be moving our points based on noise, because that's the easiest and more or less straightforward way to do that. So for noise to work, first you'll see that the first input is the position, and position, of course, comes from the geometry position. So each of these points, they each have their own position, of course. So we connect that, you'll see that it automatically converted to the green color, which means it's a vector information now. And the distance, as you will see, it's kind of like the turquoise color, so it is the float. And the float is the amount. So the scale actually dictates how much of the effect is being applied. And the distance is, well, it controls the distance for each point to be displaced. Now, if I just connect, it will be a little bit more obvious what's happening. So if when I control the scale, you'll see that indeed we're now having the result that we actually want. So for this to be controllable a bit more, we can of course increase the frequency of our noise, or we can control the offset. As you can see, it's a little bit animated. And of course the scale, well, that's what it says, controls the offset of the points. So that works. And of course, if we make the copies, that works as well. However, me personally, I usually like to do those operations like the attribute VOP. If we have the copies, I prefer to do it in the for each. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. For each primitive, right? We will do the attribute VOP like this. Oops, okay. And the result is exactly this. Primitive, right? We will do the attribute VOP.
Erklärt halt nicht warum. Ach, also die Tutorials haben echt abgebaut.
For each primitive, right? We will do the attribute VOP like this. Oops, okay. And the result is exactly the same. And of course, we feed that into polywire and normal. So sometimes the calculation that we do inside of attribute VOP, it might be dependent on the position of the points, or on the number of the points, or on some other like attribute class or whatever, really. So it will be more consistent if you do that for each. So for each, what it does is indeed, if we do the single pass, you will see that it actually does something on each of our copies. As you can see, if we do the single pass from 0 to 6, remember, because we had the 7 copies, copies go numbers from 0 to 6, well, basically 7. And so you will see that each of those are being affected by our attribute VOP. If I disable this single pass, you will see that indeed we have all of our copies back. And of course, then we polywire and do the normal, and everything works as expected. All right, so what we're gonna do now is jump inside of our attribute VOP. And for this one, I think we will middle mouse the frequency. We do the promote parameter so that we actually can control it outside of our VOP. Remember, if you're doing something inside of this node, here, any change that you do here in this inside of attribute VOP, it's not being compiled, so it's actually is recalculating each and every frame, for example, right? However, if we do outside, we do our changes on the compiled version of this node. So basically, if you want to control your attributes, it's much better and absolutely more efficient to promote your parameters outside and then control them from here. This will be more obvious than when we will be working with ramps, but for now, you can trust me on this one, right? So anyway, next up, scale, promote parameter, again, middle mouse button, offset, middle mouse button, promote parameter, and here we go. So basically we can middle mouse button, promote parameter, and here we go. So basically we can now control the amount of scale, the frequency of the noise, and of course we can do control the offset. If we write something like $t divided by, for example, 3, you will see that we have some sort of animation going. And of course, if we polywire and normal and disable this, and for example, let's do the subdivide, so it kind of is a little bit more smooth. we can now see that indeed we have the animation. Whoops, where are we? Okay, we have our animation here. But for now, it kind of is a little, we have some sort of animation going. And of course, if we polywire and normal and disable this, and for example, let's do the subdivide. So it kind of is a little bit more smooth. We can now see that indeed we have the animation.
Subdivide noch reingemacht.
Here.
Eklig.
And yeah, there you go. You can change the scale, you can change the frequency, you can, well, basically change anything you want, and everything will be working as expected. All right, so as a final thing, I promised that I will show you how to randomly colorize it. And the colorization will be again done using another attribute, but before we do that, we actually have to tell Houdini how it is connected. So let me show. If we do the color and we place the color after our copies, right? Just something like this. We can do the color type random from attributes. And as you can see, if we change the seed, all of the copies are changing their color, but they are, well, basically the colors are the same for each copy. So how do we do that? We do the connectivity, right? We get the connectivity type is point, the attribute is class. And of course here, the attribute that is random now, we right. And of course here, the connectivity type is point, the attribute is class. And of course here, the attribute that is random now, we write here class, and there you go. Everything working perfectly. You can now...
Warum?
With here, get the will be again done how it is, right? Just something like this. We can do the color type random from attributes. And as you can see, if we change the seed, all of the copies are changing their color, but they are, well, basically the colors are the same for each copy. So how do we...
Nicht bei mir. Ah. Voilà. Ah ja, normal nur fucking broken. Okay, egal, ja.
We do that. We do the connectivity, connectivity, right? We get the connectivity type is point, the attribute is class. And of course here, the attribute that is random now, we write here class, and there you go. Everything working perfectly. You can now take the seed.
Ja, bei dir, Junge, bei mir nicht. Ach, hinter dem Copy wollten die. Ja, macht Sinn. Natürlich hinter dem Copy. So, das... Was tut denn... Help. Help! Each primitive or point is assigned to a number from 0 to 1. To the number of connected sets -1. Two primitive points in general will be connected. Okay. So Color sagt, mein Attribute is class. Okay.
And of course, the interesting part about the attributes is that they're being inherited from the geometry from top to bottom of our stack of nodes. And basically what it means is that each and any color that was previously here, as you can see, our bottom is kind of like olive green and the top is ocean blue. Here we see that olive green on the bottom and on the top is ocean blue. All right, we can just disable this normal basically and recalculate normals here because it's the subdivision surface. Basically what we need is perfectly smooth normals. And of course, if we jump outside, we can see that everything is looking pretty good. Finally, you will see that I already created the principal shader, and it's basically, let's actually recreate it. So what I'm gonna do is go to Material Palette, get the principal shader, drag and drop it here first, then drag and drop it here, okay?
And drag and drop it where?
Principal shader, drag and drop it here first, then drag and drop it here.
Okay.
Okay, and increase the value of the base color, and now you can speak. And increase the value of the base color, and now you can speak the roughness, so it's gonna rough or a little bit more shiny. And of course, I have a couple of area lights. You know how to create those already. And
okay, nicht nach deinem Tutorial, Bro. Mach's mal einfach, ne? Transform. T. Ah ja, okay. Rotate. Okay, also, ja. T. Ich möchte ein World T, gibt's das nicht? Schade. Rotate. Okay.
basically, that's our setup. If I animate this, this is looking pretty cool. Okay, so again, we created circle. We recalculated the normals, right? So that the normals look to the center of our geometry. Then we made a number of copies. Then we created an attribute based on the connectivity. Of course, then we made color type random from attribute, and this attribute is the class, the one that's written here, and it randomly colorized our geometry. Then we created for each block, and each of our connected primitives was affected by our attribute VOP. Then we converted the result into polywire, subdivided the result, dropped new normals so it kind of looks more smooth, and here we go. So hopefully you learned.
Okay, also, ja, okay. Okay, weil Henning darum gebeten hat, kriegt er auch seine Aufnahme. Was ist dieses Screenshot-Snipping-Tool? Kann ich das an Start anhängen? Danke. Weil Snipping-Tool hat nicht ein ziemlich cooles Feature, und zwar kann man Videoausschnitte damit aufnehmen. Und die sind direkt in Copy-Paste-Möglichkeit. Das ist halt richtig nice. So, das heißt, ich kann nämlich sagen, hier Start. Und dann kann ich nämlich sagen... Und Stopp und Stopp. Und dann copy-paste ich das einfach und kann das dann in Discord reinkloppen. Wo ist der Henning? Da. Cool, wann ist das? 11. April. Muss ich gucken, ob ich Zeit habe. Echt ganz cool, was die machen. So, okay. Das war's?
Not just theory, but a little bit of a practice how to.
Okay. Sieht's im Discord aus? Okay. Also. Was das hier macht, verstehe ich. Okay, er nimmt die Punkte und macht da Zahlen draus. Macht Sinn, ne? Weil Wie man sieht, gibt es ganz viele Punkte. Beziehungsweise hier gibt es ein paar. Connectivity Type. Aber nee, macht er nicht. Das habe ich nicht ganz verstanden, was Connectivity macht. Each primitive. Okay, hier sind Primitives, ne? Sind 7. Aha, so hier 6, 5, 4, okay, alles klar. Is assigned to a number, ja, from 0 to the number of connected set, minus 1, 2 primitives or points that share the same will be connected. Okay, so, das heißt, er nimmt seine Points. Point Primitives. Warum denn Point? Warum nicht Primitives? Geht das denn auch? Nee, geht dann nicht. Warum nicht? Connectivity Type Point. Das verstehe ich nicht. Okay, I should probably switch back to English anyway. It's assigned to a number from 0 to the number of connected. Okay, yeah. But it's not this. Jesus. 6. I got it 6. And he give me each of them in a class. Oh, okay. And then I can say randomize from attribute of the classes. Okay. I think I got it. Kind of. You just randomize. Okay. Got it. I guess. Right. Let's do the next one. So what do we got? This one. No. We got this one. We're making this one.
Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of getting started with Houdini attributes and VOPs, and in this one we'll be taking a look on how to create a setup that will be similar to this kind of simple-ish motion graphics, but we will not just animate some sort of lines. We will actually be looking at how do we convert vectors to floats. We convert floats to vector back again, so we can actually manipulate our geometry in, for example, just one axis. Then we will take a look at how to move the points around using functions like sine, and I'll be showing you how to convert integers to floats. Why does it matter? And of course, overall it will be resulting in this neat setup. So let's learn how to do that and let's get started. Before I begin, I just wanted to say that if you're interested in supporting the channel, please consider subscribing to Patreon, because it has all the scene files and assets that are necessary to follow along. Of course, it's not mandatory, so if you don't feel like it, it's fine. So without further ado, let's get started. Don't forget to save, because what if it crashes or lights go out or something like that? That'll not be fun, of course. So anyway, create geometry, and we start with line. Here we go. I will enable the visualization of points, and the line, as you can see, it kind of goes from bottom to top, because the direction goes in the vector of 0, 1, 0, which means it looks up because the second is actually the y-axis. So if we do the direction 0, 0, 1, it will look in the z-axis. All right, so let's actually increase the number of points so we have something to work with. And finally, let's drop the attribute map and jump inside. As per usual, we will be doing something with the positions of our points, because, well, basically to create that sine wave that was animated, we have to somehow operate with the positions. So how do we do that? Now, the only position I personally want to animate is the position of the y-axis, so it kind of like goes like the classic sine, right? Oops. Kind of like this. And of course, that means that the only position that we need to change is the y. So as you might have remembered from the previous lessons, I usually talk about the vectors, the floats, and all that kind of stuff. However, you'll be interested to know that we actually can convert vectors to floats and back again. So we do that exactly by typing vector to
Because
float.
this is basically like an Unreal.
So the P is the position, which is X, Y, and Z. And it means that we can convert the vector into 3 different floats. Each of them corresponds into the X, Y, and Z. Now, as you can see, something gets broken because basically that's not enough information to feed back into our attribute VOP output. So we have to convert the float to vector back. Here it is. If we connect value 2 and value 3, you will see that everything now is in order. So now we have to convert. It gets broken because basically that's not enough information to feed back into our attribute VOP.
Why is it shown on my side? Rio, danke.
Output. So we have to convert.
Why is it doesn't look the same?
The float.
Mine looks fine.
Vector back.
Oh, because
Here
of this.
It is.
Okay.
If we connect value 2 and value 3, you'll
float
see that
vector
everything now is in order. So now we want to actually tweak the Y for each point. And obviously it is the value 2 because it goes in the X, Y, Z. Right. So we get the sine function. As you will see, sine function gets the radians and it results in the sine. So
fucking hate radius. Sine thingies are always like in, I don't know. It's like math, right? At a specific point, everything what you do in 3D or game, whatever, it ends in math. Fucking hate it. Even music. It's like, oh yeah, just shoot up with sine, and it's like, what?
How do we actually get some numbers from the points? The kind of like the most obvious way would be actually to get the numbers of the points, right? So as you can see, it goes from 0 to 49. We have 50 points, of course. And each of these number we can get from the points number. As you can see, this is the blue, which means it's an integer, which is basically used for counting, right? However, this one is a turquoise. It means it's a float. So we connect the integer point number here, you'll see that indeed we will actually have some results. So first, let's add the value that we had before to the resulting sign, and the sum of this addition will feed back into our float to vector.
Oh, look at
and
this.
Of course, we have this result, which
fancy.
Is not bad by any means. So we can actually control the, so to speak, severity, the amplitude of our addition by, you guessed it right, by dividing it.
See? It's like, hey, yeah, change it, like, we divide it by something. It's like, I don't fucking know. I mean, I'm not able to just uniform, just float different thing. I don't know. I'm sorry. Oh god, I'm tired. To divide constant. Okay. Yeah, obviously divide constant. Why not? Because you know it.
The divider will be something like this. You will see that we have some sort of result.
What? Oh, he increased it?
You will see that we have some sort of result already. So first, I'll just increase the number of points from 50 to 150, for example. You will see that we actually have more frequency going on. This is because the length of our line did not increase. If I increase the length, well, obviously it becomes, longer, and the wave becomes longer as well. However, let's actually work, for example, length of 3. Get inside. I'll disable the visualization of numbers and just enable the visualization of the points. So how do we actually make Houdini understand that we do not need so many waves inside of our sine function?
We start to train me first instead of Houdini. Would be great.
That will be achieved if we actually somehow divided the point number by some other number so that we have less of those waves going on. So I will divide by constant. However, you'll see we have some sort of a warning because it says implicit.
Oh, wait. Sorry for that. All right, let me check something. Xbox access video on PC. Oh, that's nice. Note Play 2 is available on all devices, digital, DLNA, complicated playback, okay. Requirement Xbox, okay. With Play 2, okay. Add your, okay. Devices. What is it? Devices, Bluetooth, printer, mouse. Okay. Choose connected devices. Wait. Connected devices. Am I blind? Verbundene Geräte. Where is it in German? Wo sind meine verbundenen Geräte? Choose connected device. Doesn't exist. Alright, just add a... Oh, okay. Okay, find the Chromecast. I could use a Chromecast. Then I can stream stuff to Chromecast. So it doesn't find it. Click add device. Why not? Oh shit. ITE device. What is that? Play 2. Okay, it's just change to Excel. Okay. No. Xbox activate Play 2. For DLNA streaming. Okay, here we go. I guess I have some porn in AVI. That looks fishy. This looks fishy as fuck. So we will see if it works. Sarah's probably busy. Let me see. It's an MKV file. Okay. Can I? Probably I will be able. We'll see. I have to take a... We'll take a Rotate shotted it. So for now, let me disable this. Should I? No, we knew Xbox better. Alright.
From float to integer. What this means is that we are dividing the integers by the float. As you can see, the result is kind of weird. So we can actually convert integer to float.
Okay, sorry, see, just
dividing the integers by the float. As you can see, the result is kind of weird. So we can actually convert integer to float, and you will see immediately we have an improvement. Of course, if we divide it even more, obviously we're now having the thing that we want, right? So here it is. And of course,
I decreased this one. Okay, that's nice.
We now
play MKV on Xbox One over network. That's 2015. Yeah, I don't want to have a tool.
now can obviously animate that already. So to animate this, I think the easiest way to be actually adding another constant here. So if we now add something here, you will see that our sign becomes animated.
Makes sense.
Now, previously we had a little bit more variation going inside of our wave. So how do we do that? Well, it's relatively easy actually. We need to get all of this, hold down the Alt, move here, and we add the new parameters like different divisions, different offsets, and all that kind of stuff back to our setup like this. As you can see, we now have pretty much double the amplitude because the numbers here are the same. However, if we start to tweak the dividers like this, you will see that we are now animating the second wave, which has a little bit more going on. I will actually create another copy of this, input it to here. In this one, I will divide it even a little bit more so we can animate it as well. However, I think we actually can divide it somewhat less so we have a little bit more repetition of our wave, but to make it not affect as much our animation, the result that we have after the sine function, we can divide by constant. You will see what I mean in a second. If we increase the divider, the amplitude of our third wave that affects it becomes less pronounced. Of course, if we divide it less than 1, it will be more pronounced. If we divide it more than 1, it will be less pronounced. And basically, if we, here it is, if we do the offset like this, if we promote this, so if we actually do the thing looking pretty good. Of course, if you can subdivide, normal, everything as per usual. Bits. Remember, we can start or with how to is absolutely tweakable. And
Interesting. We will see. I don't. It's math thingy, right? It's like, okay, basically just converting stuff. Okay.
Hello, welcome.
So this looks like a small one. We're actually gonna do this as well. So it's like it's hard to have like the abstract things because yeah, it's abstract, right?
To episode number 5, we're getting started with attributes and VOPs inside of Houdini series. And in this one, we'll be talking about how to use the attribute ramps, understanding how we can control values that we get from VOPs, and we can manually hand tweak them or automate some sort of animation using that. And of course, as you can see, we will be writing a little bit of an expression so that we can actually have our ramp animated. And as per usual, everything will be super tweakable. All the setups are, can be as simple or as complex as you want them. So that's that. So before we begin, I just want to say that if you're interested in supporting the channel, the best way would be to actually subscribe. Anyway, without the thing, and we'll drop the geometry node. Don't forget to save, right? So anyway, let's start. Drop a grid, and of course, let's say 1 by 1. Whoops, 1 by 1. Rows will be 2, and columns will be, let's say, 50. And of course, I want to increase the length, so it's kind of like a little bit more visual, a little bit obvious what we're doing. So anyway, let's drop the attribute VOP a little bit.
How? I basically did the same, it just looks different. I mean, is it tool? Is it like that? Just like
obvious what we're doing. So
how?
Let's say
did I miss something?
Whoops, 1 by 1. Rows will be 2, and columns will be, let's say, 50. And of course, I want to increase the length, so it's kind of like
it's Jesus Christ,
a bit more visual, a little bit obvious what we're doing. So anyway, let's drop the attribute VOP, and we will do the poly extrusion after that. And of course, if you remember, the extrusion actually works on the primitives, not on points. So that means that our attribute VOP should be running over not on points, but primitives, of course. All right, so jump in.
Right.
So that means that our attribute VOP should be running over not on points, but primitives, of course. All right, so jump inside attribute VOPs, double click or just hit enter. And what we're gonna do is actually create an attribute that will be exporting as something to control the amount of extrusion down the road. We have to somehow calculate something to control our ramp. What we're gonna do is get the number of our primitives, right? So from 0 in our case to 48. And we will actually divide the number of the primitive by total primitive number. So we have values from 0 to 1. Let me just showcase. So we get the divide, and we get the number of primitives. That's the total number of primitives, right? It's actually input number 2, and the primitive
was should connect numprim
number. So here's how it's gonna work. If we divide 0 by 50, we'll get 0. If we divide something like 25 by 50, we'll get 0.5, well, half of it. And of course, if we divide something close to 50 by 50, we will get something close to 1. And of course, let's just preview the result. We get the divider into the CD. Actually, another way of previewing it would be to just hit the X, and there will be the visualize node dropped here. So that's pretty useful. And you will see that everything is black. Why is that? If you watched the previous video, you will know that in order to have the float as a result of division of two integers, so basically right now we are dividing anything by, we are dividing the primitive numbers by number of primitives, but Houdini thinks that we want the result as an integer, and the integer result will be either 0 or 1 or 2 or something else. To have float, we have to convert the integer to float, and that will make it understand that what we need is, well, as a result, we need a float. You'll see it goes from 0 to 1 in the red, because the visualize gets our visualizations in the red color. Of course, we can delete this visualizer connected to the CD, and you will see that indeed.
Why is it still working if you're using the wrong one? Because you said like, oh yeah, and use the numprim instead of the. Oh, give me back. Give me that. It looks more right over here, right? Because wait, let me delete those lights. Yeah, here we go. Because it said like, okay, don't. It's the same. Why is it the same? No, it's not the same. It's different.
Something going from 0, as in black.
Okay.
Actually, somehow I connected the number of points. We actually need the number of primitives, of course. And you will see that indeed it goes from black.
Right, because the points are still there. Like, if I'm doing this, you're gonna have different kind of numbers. Okay, got it.
From 0 to 1. All right, next step. I will actually do the export of this attribute. It will call bind export, connected here, and we'll name it, let's say extruder, just for the sake of us remembering what's going on. In this
okay, so he's basically defining a variable? I don't know.
this case, you know, sometimes you might come across.
Oh, this jumping is so, it's like he's trying to explain something and then he's basically jumping back. It's a little bit complicated
tutorials
sometimes.
that will actually indeed say that you can.
What are you doing? It's like, don't do something and don't.
You might come across some tutorials that will actually.
He's clicking stuff.
You know, sometimes you might come across some tutorials that will actually.
Because don't just click stuff.
Actually, indeed, say that you can. You can.
Why is it not working? Why?
Actually
Visual code, this one. Okay.
do it by the color. However, if somewhere down here you will have the color attributes overriding it,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
primitive, you will see that it kind of destroys the whole effect. So I wouldn't personally recommend writing here the color attribute. I would actually say that you can use it for the previews. It will not hurt, obviously, but for actual extrusion, you'll be better off explicitly writing the attribute that you need. And of course, if you now drop the color
Got it.
and make it whichever color you want, even from here, you'll see that the color changes, but our extruder distance does not change. So there's that.
I get it. I understand
anyway,
it.
I'll leave it on just for visualization purposes for now. And of course, next up, we now want to drop a attribute rump to actually control how our this kind of like staircase is being controlled. How do we do that? Well, as the name suggests, we need to drop the ramp parameter. Here it is. I'll move it to the side. And of course, this ramp will be color and this ramp will be color as well. And we have the input. And obviously, as you can see right now,
So he's ramping the number in, and okay.
everything stays kind of the same. However, if we now go outside to our geometry and see, we'll have now a way to control our staircase. And
what? Oh, because he's... Okay. What? Okay, this is sick. Maybe a black one. Okay, this is nice. What? Okay, this is pretty sick. What? This is pretty nice.
And that kind of like already working. However, I want it to be a bit different since we're not actually controlling the color itself, but we are controlling the float as a result of our division that we had previously. I would say we need the ramp type not to be RGB color ramp, but spline ramp.
Did pay attention.
Itself, a bit different since we're not actually controlling the color itself, but we are controlling the float as a result of our division that we had previously. I would say we need the ramp type not to be RGB.
Is that art?
Color ramp, but spline ramp, and it says float. So here it is. For whatever reason, it destroyed itself, but it will go back just fine if we go back outside to our geometry. And let's maximize it a little bit. You will see that.
I'm not able to wait. Attribute back. What?
So here it is. For whatever reason, it destroyed itself, but it will go back just fine if we go back outside to our geometry. And let's maximize it a little bit. Tree itself, but it says float. So here it is. For whatever reason, it destroyed itself, but it will go back just fine.
Oh, okay. I'm just dumb.
Fine if we go back outside to our geometry. And let's maximize it a little bit. You will see that indeed everything works as expected. All right, so next up, the interpolation, as you can see, we can set to, for example, Catmull ROM, so it looks a little bit more smooth. This one, again, Catmull ROM. And now we can just left click here, start moving our things around, and everything looks and works just fine. Finally, I just want to show you how I create. By the way, you just can select this pin, you can press delete, or you just can right click delete. Oops, right click. Okay, right click delete. All right, that worked. And of course, let's see how can we actually animate the whole thing. We can just move it left and right, but in our case, I think it will be more interesting if we animate the value. And you will see that we actually can write some.
Oh, okay. I think the next tutorials we're gonna do, depending on what it is, it's like I know that we need stuff, but it's hard to just do an abstract thing.
Sort of a simple rule to animate our things right here. So for the value.
And I probably won't do it today. We're gonna finish this and then we call it off today.
See, let's say
okay, it's just animating it.
Now that we animate a little bit here, see what we're saying is that you can actually calculate simple ramps. In our case, it was extremely simple, so to speak, and that result. And if you want to learn more,
it's nice, but if you don't have a actually reason to do it, it's like hard for me to use, you know. All right, anyway, not super long stream today. Got a little bit meh. I don't know. Nothing going on. Just the tutorial, it's a little bit weird. Maybe we're gonna look out for something to build actually in Houdini the next time, and I think it's maybe on a weekend. We'll see. Everyone have a great Easter, and we're gonna call it night, and I wish you a great Easter.